Hi, I'm Matt Morgan, and this is History of Asia. This is our first lecture video where I'm just going to go over the course, the basics of what the course is about, and also the technical aspects of the course, the assignments, how everything is graded, etc. And in fact, we're gonna do that first. First thing I want to say, there is no assignment that is due at the beginning of the term, so no worries there. We're going to ease into this in a less stressful way. Secondly, there are no in-person meetings at all for this, so no worries there. Third, there are no direct meetings of any kind that are mandatory for this course, meaning that you don't ever have to talk to me directly, right? You post and then I post and then you post, right? We have discussions that way, but um, we don't have to actually have an online meeting. I'm planning on incorporating some of that as a way to kind of give people bonus points, but I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate that right now. So I want to see how it goes first. But there are no actual meetings, so there's no time where we all have to be online together or anything like that. So no worries there. And anything that I bring in about that with like Zoom meetings and things, it will be completely optional, usually extra credit. So okay. Uh, so with all that said, the way that this course works, and I will summarize it very quickly. Every week you have a module, right? You have a week 1 module, week 2 module, week 3 module. My voice just cracked, but I'm not going to go back and do it over because I've already, okay. So a week 4 module, week 5 module, right? So you'll go to that week's module and then you'll find your assignments for that week, right? Uh, Pretty self-explanatory. Now in all of those week modules, there will be lecture videos, okay, that like this one here. That's going to be in the week 1 uh, module. And the way that it works is you'll watch these videos and you'll do the reading. And every week you will have a reading discussion board where you will uh, find something that you found interesting about the reading or something you didn't know before, something you want to write about, and you will write 10 sentences on that discussion board post about the reading, right? So, and they can be 10 sentences about one thing you found really, really interesting, or they can just be bullet points of 10 different facts, right? It's your choice, or a combination of the two, right? As long as there are 10 sentences, and you can go over, it's no problem to go over, and it's no problem uh, to uh, to go under by a little bit, as long as you know you're within the ballpark. But 10 sentences is just people want a number, so I use 10 sentences, 2 paragraphs, right? Um, so uh, yeah, you'll write about the discussion, the reading for that week, right? And you'll watch the lecture videos. With the lecture videos, there will usually be 2 or so videos per week, sometimes more, of me lecturing. They'll be very, very brief. I'm going to do my best to make these videos as brief as possible. And the great thing about videos versus lecturing in person is I can go much faster because you can always rewind if you don't catch something. On top of that, just talking to myself into the camera, I move a lot faster, a lot less small talk, a lot less, unfortunately, a lot less, well, maybe fortunately, a lot less attempts at humor, right? So it's more to the point. So um, yeah, you'll have these lecture videos in your weekly folder. You'll watch those. You'll read that week's reading, okay, and then you will post in the discussion board for that week, the reading discussion board, okay, and then you'll have another discussion board. You have 2 discussion boards every week you have to post in. The second discussion board is a primary source discussion board where there will be a document that I've uploaded, and it will be very brief. It will not be a long reading. Usually like a page or so of printed text, maybe 2, and you'll read it and you'll answer a set of 5 questions, usually 1 to 2 sentences per question, right? And there are no right or wrong answers to those questions. They're there for they're there to make you so that you look at the primary sources. You know what people of the time thought in their own words, right? You look directly into thinking, right? So that's very important. So those are the two posts you'll make: the reading discussion board, the primary source discussion board, and of course you'll watch the lecture videos. And I forgot to mention, you with my lecture videos, I usually will have a list of very short supplemental videos that I will have a description of as I post them, and you'll watch those, and those will make the lecture and the reading make a lot more sense. It will be very, very intuitive and straightforward what to do. So what about tests? Well, we don't have tests. We don't have any exams. We don't have any quizzes. Historians have moved away from that kind of teaching and assessing, and I was very old-fashioned. I refused to change, but now I've changed. So instead of exams, we're going to have reflections, right? And those are going to be around 3 to 5 discussion questions that you'll write a paragraph on each. And those will happen once every 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, the goal is to have them every 2 weeks, but I'm not sure if I want to overload you that much. I'll see how it goes and how much the information clicks with people. But the questions will be, it'll all be open note online. I don't, I'm not one of these people who's like, don't ever use Wikipedia, right, when I check it every day. So, and not about history, but, if I want to know, something about King Von or something like that, right, I look at Wikipedia, or, you know how it works, right? Anyway, so I can't believe. Okay, never mind. Okay, but you can check that. You can check anything. You can have your book, and these are supposed to be your thoughts. And the questions are very subjective. They're all about your thoughts, what your values are, how you think. They aren't really right, wrong answers kinds of questions, but they are questions that you're required to put some thought into, right? And that is the ultimate goal of this course, to make you think, right? Because we're looking at the majority of the human race in this course, and we're trying to understand their values, their culture, their cultures, their much diversity, massive amount of diversity in Central and Eastern Asia and Southeastern Asia, and why the modern world is the way it is, right? And to your average American, certainly, Westerners in general, these cultures are very different from what most of us are used to. The value systems are very different. The attitudes are very different. And this is something that we're going to take a look at. And your thoughts on that are very valuable. In fact, they're the most important part of this course, right? Regurgitating some facts, some dates. That's not, as long as you can put things in chronological order. This happened and then this happened. The major events, right? You don't put the Mongol Empire after the I don't know, after World War I or something like that, right? You're good, right? You're good on that. It's about thinking about the deeper issues, the deeper picture, right? So every week you'll have the 2 discussion boards in terms of what you're graded on. Every 2 weeks you'll have a reflection, right? And twice in the semester, once at the halfway point and once at the end, you'll watch a film, and the film will be usually one of 2, right, each time, chosen by me, and you'll fill out a questionnaire, a book review that's basically a questionnaire about that film. And the thing about the films is they're all awesome films. They relate to the course very well, and they're completely free, so you won't have to get any kind of subscriptions or anything. But I like films. I think I've learned much from films. I think that, especially documentaries, I feel like they're an important learning tool. I mean, I don't look at films as kind of an easy assignment or something like that. I really like how they make people think, and with films you get the full, multimedia experience in terms of understanding something. So so that's it for the course, right? You have the 2 weekly discussion boards, the reflections, and the 2 film reviews. Right? So it's not too bad. And of course, you'll have to watch the lectures each week so you can do the reflections, because the reflections are as much about the lectures as the reading, and everything will tie together. Right? The reading schedule that I have up there now is mostly intact, but there are a couple of changes I have to make, because we have 2 textbooks, and this is something that's mandated. Not, I don't have control, but I'm going to incorporate both of those textbooks because you have to buy both. So we're going to make sure that we use them. I'm going to try to come up with some kind of meeting that we could have that maybe I'll figure out a way to make it worth your while, but to also not make it mandatory. We can have Zoom meetings every once in a while, and discuss some of the material for the course, because I want, you're paying money to take this course. I want this course to change your thinking about East Asia. I want you to have a new understanding about this part of the world. A little bit about me. I did my undergraduate at Mississippi State University. I'm originally from a city called Tupelo, Mississippi. I did a master's in anthropology at the same university, and then I got my PhD at St. Louis University in 2016. My primary area of interest right now is medieval East Asian history, but I'm also interested in many different areas of history. My PhD is actually on medieval Spain, a medieval European topic. My primary interest is the history of Christianity in East Asia in the 16th and 17th centuries, currently at the moment, but I'm also interested, for the last few years, I've been looking at a lot of Kamakura shogunate in Japan. So I have a wide variety of varied interests. My second minor field is late antiquity, the Roman Byzantine empires. Right? So, okay. Let's see. Do I have anything else to go over technically about the class? Yeah, again, you can text me anytime you have any questions. I want this to be fun and easygoing, and I don't believe that students learn well under stress. I can remember, if you've ever been in the military, you've ever been in basic training, right? You know how hard it is to put the, to reassemble the M16 while somebody's screaming at you, right? I think the worst for me was when my first jump at jump school. I jumped out, I hit the ground, and I'm alive. And then next thing you know, there's somebody with a bullhorn about 20 feet from me in a truck screaming at me to get my chute, and I'm like sitting there struggling. Oh, I don't do well under that kind of pressure. So I don't expect anything like that in any class, right? And certainly not like that, but I mean in general, you learn better when you're at ease, I feel like. And that's not a common mentality, but I believe that the science backs me up on that. I believe that the psychology of pedagogy, follows that. All right. Okay. So let's talk about Monsoon Asia briefly. Okay, the Asian continent. We call this history of Asia, but we're not really focused on the entire continent of Asia. There are parts of Asia that we tend to leave out. For example, Russian Asia, right? Siberia, the far north. We're not going to focus on that really at all, because that's not really part of the unit. Similarly, Southwestern Asia, what we call the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, right? We don't focus on that region of Asia either. We're going to focus on what we call Monsoon Asia. And by Monsoon Asia, that's the part of Asia that is affected drastically by the monsoons. And if you know what the monsoon is, right, it's a yearly series of storms that batters much of southern and eastern Asia, right? If you look at a map of the world, you'll notice that on the lines of latitude, right, that there's pretty much desert from the western tip of northwestern Africa all the way into to eastern Iran, and there would be desert in India and in China also, parts of China, southern China proper. There is deserts in northwestern China, but in southern China there would be deserts if it weren't for the fact that the monsoons exist. What it is that the Himalayan mountains trap rainfall, right, coming off of the moisture coming off of the Indian Ocean. And even though India, the Indian subcontinent, is very, very dry for most of the year, it becomes absolutely flooded with torrential rains. The same thing happens in much of China and in southeastern Asia, right? Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, etc. Right? So this weather pattern dominates the traditional agricultural system. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But with that agricultural system comes certain cultural similarities that all these cultures share. Right? And we're going to talk more about those in a moment as well. So this is the unit we're focused on. India, China, Southeastern Asia, right? Both what we call insular Southeastern Asia, the islands, Indonesia, the Philippines, and mainland Southeastern Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, etc. And Japan and Korea are part of that as well. So really the way that we can think about it, the simplest way to think about it is all the parts of Asia where rice is the dominant staple crop, and where the weather and the rainfall from the monsoons make rice the most profitable crop, food crop to grow, right? So, or to rely on. Okay, so Asia is the largest of the 7 continents. The majority of the human race lives in Asia. So the 5 most populous countries, we've got 4 of them that are Asia: China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And you know, it says here that China is the most populous country. When I made this slide several years ago, that was the case. Now it's India. India has actually jumped ahead of China significantly now. So India is the world's most populous country. In fact, 1 out of every 6 people on Earth lives in India. So we're looking at a massive number of people. But even in countries like Indonesia, the Philippines, Pakistan, we're looking at very, very high population densities. Bangladesh has one of the highest population densities in the world, right? But that when we refer to India in this course, we usually mean the Indian subcontinent: Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and sometimes Myanmar. Right? So, so we're looking at a huge portion of the world's population. And I have this map here that shows how, if we went by population, how big countries would be, right? And some countries would be very, 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 very small. So, and you can see how big India is by comparison. And there are countries in West Africa that are vast, that, like Chad, that are not even blips on this map. Okay. Monsoon Asia refers primarily to the area of the Asian continent where rice cultivation is facilitated by the wetter climate brought by the monsoons. This particular focus on the history of Asia is centered on the 2 poles of India and China, with other regions orbiting these 2 massive and ancient civilizations. Right. So we have Indian civilization and Chinese civilization, and then the satellites of those 2 ancient civilizations. Right. For China, what we call Sinic civilization, you have Korea, Japan, to a lesser extent Mongolia. For Indic civilization, you have Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia is kind of a mixture of a Confucian Chinese worldview and a Hindu, Indian, or Buddhist worldview. Right? So those are the two poles that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about China and India more than any other two countries, though we will talk about Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, etc. So Asia stretches to the Ural Mountains, right? Just to give an idea of just how vast it is, though again, we're not going to really focus on the regions of Siberia, though we will be focusing somewhat on Central Asia, the stands, as you call them, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, right? And that's due to the fact that these countries played an outsized role in the Middle Ages as part of the Mongol Empire. And we'll talk more about that as the course goes on. We're not going to cover much of this region at all, as stated earlier. We might talk about Persia some, but Southwestern Asia and in general, Islamic civilization in general isn't really a focus of the course, even though there are some heavily Islamic countries in the region we're talking about: Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, right? These are thoroughly Islamic societies. So we will talk about it some, but not with to the extent we might in some other courses. And that's just for the sake that we can't talk about East Asia and Southeast Asia in depth and cover other parts too, right? We have to, and of course we're talking about a geographical and cultural unit, right? That's shaped by the Indian Ocean here. Right? When the subcontinent of India slammed into Asia, I think it's what 10 million years ago, right? Created the Himalayan mountains, this massive mountain range that traps moisture and causes the monsoon to really slam into Southern Asia, Southeastern Asia, and then through Southeastern Asia up through China into Japan, bypassing this massive, absolutely massive mountain range, the highest mountains on Earth. So the Indian Ocean played a major role in shaping all of the societies that we're going to talk about. Even Japan, which is relatively far away from the Indian Ocean, right? Its weather patterns are still shaped by it. That's why in Japan, for much of the year, it rains some every day, right? So in Japan, I've spent some time in Japan, and one thing is that in public they have these free, or at least they used to, these free umbrellas that are in bins that you walk out of the the convenience store, and you can just grab a free umbrella and carry it, and it's as a Westerner, as an American, I didn't think to, it rains in Mississippi a lot, but it's not such a daily occurrence that I'm going to have an umbrella, right? So it's part of life in Japan. And again, we're going to talk about both mainland and insular Southeast Asia. And you can see Indonesia here in brown, Malaysia in green. These are both the thoroughly Islamic countries I was talking about, though Indonesia does have some populations that belong to other religions, Hinduism in particular, but there are also Buddhists and Christians who live there. The Philippines is a very thoroughly Christian society with a large Muslim population. And so, we're gonna look at all the different aspects of the culture, the geography, the agriculture, the economy, the history, and we're going to try to kind of paint a picture of each of these societies so that you can have a better understanding of them. And it's very important because, this has a tremendous impact on the entire world. And of course, you look to the northeast, we have the Pacific, right? And this is Northeast Asia, which is very different in some respects from Southern and Southeast Asia, with a much colder climate and cultures that kind of invoke their value systems are those that evolved in kind of a colder climates, right? So here's another map of Monsoon Asia. I won't belabor the point, but these are the societies that we're going to be covering. So why are they So similar. Well, I had mentioned rice agriculture. Rice needs a large amount of water to grow effectively. If you can manage to cultivate rice, though, you have a denser calorie per hectare than virtually any other staple crop. So you can feed more people with rice than virtually anything, including corn, right, which is the second most calorie dense per hectare uh, major crop that we grow. In uh, monsoon Asia, people do eat corn, what we call corn, maize. In Britain, corn is wheat, right? Corn, and just a bit of trivia, corn in traditional English was always the main staple crop that you grew, right? So it depended on what you grew the most of. That was called corn, right? Once English settlers arrive in the Americas and they start growing maize as their main crop, they just called it corn. And so in America, we call corn corn, right? Though in Britain, wheat is corn. Uh, so, but this is a very labor intensive crop also. It requires a lot of human effort to grow crops, even in the 21st century. If you look at rice farms in Japan, they involve a lot of backbreaking work. Uh, in the United States, the original 13 colonies, British colonies in South Carolina, Georgia, where you had rice plantations very early on in the 17th century. Those are some of the most brutal plantations in colonial U.S. history due to the fact that rice is so difficult uh, to grow. And of course, the enslaved laborers who grew the rice on those plantations had taken their rice growing techniques from West Africa to the New World, and so they were masters of growing rice. But even if you know if you're a master of this kind of agriculture, it's still very, very labor intensive and involves standing in still water for hours out of the day, and uh, but so it requires a lot of cooperation. You have to have a large number of people working together in very rough conditions to produce this crop that can feed a large number of people. And that leads to the next point, which is about collectivism versus individualism. Uh, in monsoon Asia, societies are collectivist, meaning that they focus on the group rather than the individual. So I've got here an image of Beowulf, the great Anglo-Saxon hero, facing down the dragon. And when he was an elderly man, he faced the dragon, and the dragon ended up killing him, even though he slew the dragon. But Beowulf was a great hero, and he faced the dragon. He initially faced it alone. His young disciple came and helped him, but he was all about battling that dragon one on one. So that's the Western ideal. One hero who, as an individual, does great things. Hercules, Odysseus, going back to the ancient Greeks, right? Uh, in monsoon Asia, it's very different. It's about collectives. Um, so, for example, you have here the three greatest heroes of ancient China, the three brothers, right? It's a group, not a single individual, right? They don't ever function as individuals. They function as a sworn brotherhood, and that's a big difference because to bring in this rice crop, everybody has to work together. You have to have large families in which the patriarch and matriarch of the family have a lot of authority over the younger people, where they can be compelled, if necessary, to go out and to work and to bring in this crop, right? So, and that's not to say that it's a dictatorial kind of system or anything like that, but it's a system in which uh, the individual has to give way to the interests of the group. For example, in Japan, they have a saying: "The nail that sticks up will be hammered down." Right? They say that to children in kindergarten because if that means if you stand out, right? If you're not going with the flow, you're not going with the good of the group is going to have to correct you because it's the group that matters, not the individual. This is the biggest difference between this part of the world and the Western world, and it defines pretty much, it lies at the basis of most of our differences. This interest in collectivism, and I'll give the example. During the pandemic, I absolutely hated those masks. I felt like I couldn't breathe in them. I felt like it was something that was being forced on me. I mean, I wore them, but I had to, right? In East Asia, people wear those masks under normal circumstances. If you're sick, you wear one of those masks, right? Just as a courtesy to your fellow citizen, right? Because they're designed to look at for the good of the group, right? Whereas many of us were like, this is a free country, you, you know. I'm not saying I was like rabid or anything like that, I just set my ways, right? So I mean, but I wore the mask like everybody else, but that's my point that in East Asia it isn't the individual will uh, isn't meant to be expressed much of the time, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward. So you have a collectivist society, social organization based on very labor intensive agriculture, much more labor intensive than growing, say, wheat, and certainly growing corn, like in which for example, my grandparents lived off of in Mississippi, right? Growing corn, vegetables, everything, uh, being farmers. But uh, you have these very, very labor intensive crops, and you have this emphasis on the group. That meant that the main unit of operation in society was the family, not the individual. So legally, the government, when they think about their population, they don't think about collections of individuals. They think about families. They think about households, right? Uh, in fact, an example of this is the fact that in many of these societies, when you list your name, you put your surname before your given name, right? So if we had the Japanese or Chinese or Korean structure of naming, I would be Morgan Matt, right? So because I would put my family name first. That's just how these societies have traditionally operated, emphasizing the family over the individual. So we end up with complex moral philosophies, political philosophies that really strengthen the power of the father over his family, right? And the mother too, to a certain extent, but also the elders of the family, the grandmothers, grandfathers. On top of that, there's an emphasis on honoring elders that really isn't present in Western culture, right? We tend to be youth focused. We tend to look at, uh, you know, young people as more important. The children are more important, and that that some of that goes back to centuries of Christianity, right? Where you have, for example, in the New Testament, where Christ, the little children come to approach Christ, and he says, let them come, right? That there is an emphasis on children being the focal point in Western society that isn't really, and that's not to say that people don't protect their children, honor their children. That's not what I'm saying. But the revered members of society are the aged in this part of the world, traditionally, certainly. Those are the people who eat first, who receive the most during times of scarcity, right? And that's part of this focus on strong family bonds and kind of a collectivist spirit. That is in part shaped by nature, shaped by the needs of rice agriculture and the monsoon. Okay, so we just start out with a little bit of background here before we move forward. So, Neolithic Revolution, that's a term that's very important. Means New Stone Age, right? As opposed to the Paleolithic. So we're going all the way back to the beginning of agriculture here, right? So the difference between the Neolithic and Paleolithic is farming. The Neolithic populations learned how to cultivate agriculture. They could feed many more people per acre than nomads, that hunter-gatherers that had to follow large game. They had to be continuously on the move, following large herds of animals. Now, they ate much more protein than people did in the Neolithic Revolution, The Neolithic Revolution kind of shifted much of humanity's diet away from a protein-based diet where people ate a combination of meat and fruits and nuts to one where people are eating grains. But people were the populations of these farming communities began to grow very, very rapidly. And of course, they began to overtake the hunter-gatherers just out of sheer numbers. And with farming, you also have a division of labor. Right? Not everyone has to be concerned with finding food, unlike in a hunter-gathering community where every male is essentially a hunter and every woman is essentially a gatherer. Right? In these Neolithic societies, you could have specialists, you could have blacksmiths, you could have priests, you could have scribes, because the farmers were able to grow so much food that not everyone had to be involved in food production. And of course, these Neolithic societies, they emerged in the great river valleys because that's where the soil was most fertile. For example, the most fertile soil on earth is in the Nile River Valley in Egypt. That's why ancient Egyptian civilization developed there. The Mississippi Delta in the United States has the most fertile soil in the United States, which is why you have these, you had these massive cotton plantations there. Because people were making millions of dollars off of that soil before the Civil War. And it's the same thing in Monsoon Asia. Right? You have the Yellow River Valley, the Honghe River in northern China. You have the Yangtze River in southern China. You have the Indus River in northwestern India and Pakistan. You have the Ganges River in eastern India. And these river valleys are where these civilizations began. The same process, using the monsoon, the swelling of the river, flood control to produce massive rice farms. And of course, it took a great amount of labor to construct the irrigation systems, the dams, and flood control systems that enabled living near these river valleys, which again promoted social organization. Okay, all right. I think I'm going to stop this video here. We've got a couple more slides. I'm going to incorporate them into our next lecture so that we can just stop here and I'm paranoid about the the computer shutting off or something and me having to do this over. So I don't want that to happen. I'm going to put these in our next lecture. But if you have any questions about the course, I just wanted to give you an overview here, not get in depth into anything, just provide some fundamentals for when we look into these topics more closely. If you have any questions, please send me a text, 618-504-6719, right? So please do, anytime. All right, well, thanks. Have a good evening.